The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 Dominion fleet emerged from warp at the edge of the New Horizon system, their battleships casting long shadows over the human colony. High Overlord 𝗦𝗫𝘀 studied the settlement from his command throne, sprawling fields, domed habitats, no orbital defenses. Just as intelligence had reported. A soft target. Pathetic, 𝗦𝗫𝘀 growled, mandibles clicking in amusement. They huddle in their little huts, unaware of the storm about to break upon them. His tactical officer, 𝗦𝗫𝘀, hesitated. Overlord, our scans show minimal military presence, but... But nothing, 𝗦𝗫𝘀 interrupted. The humans are weak. Their empire is scattered, their warriors few. This will be over before their pathetic cries reach their homeworld. The order was given. Plasma batteries charged. Dropships launched. Below, the colonists of New Horizon noticed the sudden darkness as the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 fleet blocked the sun. Alarms blared. But there was no panic. No screaming. Only silence. Captain Elias Vance, his hands still dirty from the morning's harvest, looked up at the sky. He sighed. Took him long enough. The first orbital strike hit the outskirts, a fireball meant to inspire terror. The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 expected chaos. Instead, the colony's lights flickered, then stabilized. Underground generators, shielded and redundant. 𝗦𝗫𝘀 scowled. Why aren't they running? Then the human transmissions began. Not pleas for mercy. Not surrender. Just a single repeating message on all frequencies. You shouldn't have come. The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 drop pods hit dirt, warriors spilling out, plasma rifles humming. They expected cowering civilians. Instead, the streets were empty. Doors locked. Windows barred. A child's toy, abandoned in the road. 𝗦𝗫𝘀's voice crackled over the comms. Overlord, something's wrong. The ground erupted. Mining charges, jury-rigged into IEDs, tore through the first wave. From rooftops, colonists, farmers, engineers, even teenagers, opened fire with scavenged railguns and repurposed industrial lasers. A 𝗦𝗲𝘀 warrior collapsed, his armor pierced by a projectile that shouldn't have penetrated. His last sight. A human grandmother, her hands steady, reloading a rifle older than she was. 𝗦𝗫𝘀 watched the feed in disbelief. His elite troops, butchered by farmers. His flawless invasion, crumbling before it began. Then the real trap was sprung. The colony's water tower exploded, not outward, but inward, collapsing into a hidden launch silo. A missile streaked skyward, not at the dropships, but at the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 command vessel. 𝗦𝗫𝘀 had just enough time to scream before the kinetic round punched through his ship's shields and detonated the reactor. In orbit, the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 fleet recoiled. On the surface, the humans emerged from their hiding places, weapons smoking. Captain Vance keyed the comms, his voice calm. This is New Horizon. First wave's done. Who's next? The galaxy would hear that message. And the galaxy would learn. The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 survivors regrouped in the ruins of their own landing zone, their confidence shattered. What was supposed to be a slaughter had become a nightmare. Their comms crackled with panicked reports, entire squads vanishing, ambushed by humans who moved like ghosts through the colony's labyrinth of tunnels and trenches. Sergeant 𝗕𝗲, his carapace still scorched from a close call with a plasma trap, snarled into his helmet mic, "They're not just defending, they're hunting us." Above, the remaining 𝗦𝗲𝘀 ships hesitated, their commanders arguing. Retreat was unthinkable. But continuing the assault? That was suicide. On the surface, Captain Elias Vance moved through the colony's underground network, checking on his people. A teenager, barely old enough to hold a rifle, handed him a data pad. "They're jamming our long-range signals, but the shortwave's still working. We've got eyes on their rally point." Vance studied the feed. The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 were digging in, calling for reinforcements. He smirked. Good. Let them think they've got time. Across New Horizon, the colonists worked in eerie silence. What the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that this wasn't just some backwater settlement. It was founded by veterans. Men and women who had survived worse than this. A mechanic, her hands blackened with grease, tapped the side of a repurposed mining drone. "This'll do it." The machine hummed to life, its drill replaced with a makeshift plasma cutter. Outside, the distant thump of 𝗦𝗲𝘀 artillery shook dust from the ceiling. In the streets, the aliens advanced again, this time in tighter formations, their weapons sweeping every shadow. They didn't see the tripwires. Didn't notice the pressure plates. The first explosion took out their lead tank. The second ripped through their flank. Then the rooftops lit up with gunfire, not random, but precise. Surgical. A 𝗕𝗲𝘀 officer screamed into his comms. "They're picking us apart. Where are the reinforcements?" The reply was static. High above, the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 fleet had bigger problems. A distress signal from New Horizon had finally broken through the jamming. And someone had answered. The UNS Retribution dropped out of warp without warning, its hull scarred from battles the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 couldn't imagine. Its captain, a woman whose name wasn't in any official record, studied the tactical display. "Open a channel to the colony." Vance's voice came through, calm as ever. "Took you long enough." She smiled. "We brought gifts." The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 command ship detected the missile launch too late. It wasn't a warhead. It was a data packet. A single file, broadcast on every frequency. The last thing the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 ground forces heard was their own commander's voice, trembling. "Fall back. Fall back now." Then the line went dead. On the surface, the aliens froze. The humans didn't. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 survivors never stood a chance. Their reinforcements arrived in a blaze of warp signatures, fresh troops pouring from drop pods, only to find their forward positions already overrun. The humans hadn't just held their ground. They'd pushed forward, reclaiming block after block with terrifying efficiency. Inside what remained of the colony's central comm hub, Captain Vance watched the tactical feed as the UNS Retribution carved through the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 fleet like a knife through flesh. Ships that had loomed invincible hours before now burned in high orbit, their wreckage scattering across the sky. A young lieutenant handed him a report. "They're surrendering." Vance didn't look up. "No, they're not. They're stalling." He was right. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 weren't built for surrender. Their entire culture was predation, conquer or die. But this was something new. This was fear. A transmission crackled through from the Retribution. "Vance, we're detecting another wave inbound. Bigger. They're not here for the colony anymore." Vance understood immediately. This had stopped being about territory the moment the first 𝗕𝗲𝘀 ship exploded. Now it was about pride. About sending a message. On the ground, the remaining 𝗕𝗲𝘀 warriors regrouped for one last push. They didn't care about tactics anymore. They just wanted to take as many humans with them as they could. They never got the chance. The Retribution's main batteries spoke. Not at the fleet. Not at the reinforcements screaming toward the system. At the planet itself. Precision strikes hammered the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 positions, kinetic rods slamming down from orbit with mathematical perfection. Each impact was a thunderclap, each explosion a perfectly contained hell. The colonists had dug in deep, they felt the shockwaves, but their shelters held. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 above ground simply ceased to exist. In orbit, the enemy reinforcements arrived to find their vanguard already gone. Their sensors showed the Retribution waiting, guns hot. For the first time in 𝗕𝗲𝘀 history, an entire battle fleet came to a full stop. No demands were issued. No negotiations offered. The humans simply waited. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 hesitated. Then they turned and ran. Back on New Horizon, Vance stepped out into the morning light. The air smelled of smoke and ozone. Around him, colonists emerged from their shelters, blinking against the sun. A child tugged at his sleeve. "Are they gone?" Vance looked up at the sky, where the last 𝗕𝗲𝘀 drives flickered out of sensor range. "For now." But the message had been sent. The galaxy had watched. And for the first time in centuries, something had made the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 Dominion afraid. The silence that followed the battle was louder than the war itself. Across the galaxy, sensor arrays and listening posts captured every moment, the 𝗕𝗲𝘀 Armada's arrival, their brutal assault, and their catastrophic failure. But what truly sent shockwaves through every species wasn't the human victory. It was how casually they achieved it. On New Horizon, the colonists went back to work without fanfare. They buried their dead, repaired their homes, and replanted their fields. No celebrations. No parades. Just quiet determination as they scrubbed 𝗕𝗲𝘀 blood from their streets. Captain Vance stood at the edge of a freshly turned field, watching farmers weld armor plating over their tractors. A child's laughter carried from a nearby playground built atop a former artillery emplacement. The UNS 𝗕𝗲𝘀 remained in orbit, a silent sentinel. Its captain hadn't even bothered to descend to the surface. When the first alien diplomats arrived, shaken representatives from neutral systems who'd come to mediate, she greeted them with a single sentence, "You're late to the party." The 𝗦𝗲𝘀 Dominion officially denied the defeat. Their propaganda machines spun tales of a tactical realignment. But their fleets withdrew from every system bordering human space within weeks. Their mercenaries stopped taking contracts near human colonies. Even their pirates suddenly developed a sense of self-preservation. Vance received a message from Earth Command. Just 3 words, *good work. Stand by. *He smiled and went back to fixing his irrigation system. Across the galaxy, other species took notice. The Krill Collective, who had once scoffed at human softness, quietly updated their military databases. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 Empire recalled their scout ships from human trade routes. A dozen minor powers sent envoys bearing gifts and treaties. But the most telling reaction came from the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 themselves. Deep in their territory, a single transmission leaked from a military outpost. A young warrior, voice shaking, asked his commander, "*What do we do if they come for us next?" **. The reply took 10 seconds, an eternity in combat communications. "Pray they're feeling merciful." On New Horizon, the first new settlers arrived. Not refugees, but volunteers. Veterans. Families. People who wanted to live under a sky guarded by the legend of what happened when you pushed humans too far. They brought seeds, tools, and a quiet pride. As night fell, Vance stood on his porch, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the 𝗦𝗲𝘀 licked their wounds. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 kept watch. And the galaxy learned the oldest human lesson all over again. It's not the size of the predator that matters. It's the ferocity of the prey. The first 𝗦𝗲𝘀 defector arrived 3 months after the battle. His shuttle limped into New Horizons airspace, its hull scorched and engines failing. When security teams pulled him from the wreckage, he clutched a data crystal in shaking claws. "They'll kill me for this," he rasped in broken standard. "But I had to come." The crystal contained schematics, deployment patterns, the location of every 𝗦𝗲𝘀 stronghold bordering human space. Vance studied the files late into the night, the blue light reflecting in his tired eyes. It wasn't just military intelligence, it was a cultural autopsy. The Dominion was fracturing. On the 𝗕𝗲𝘀, the captain reviewed the same data with cold precision. "They're afraid," her tactical officer noted. She corrected him without looking up. "They're learning." Across the quadrant, the ripple effects grew. The Krill Collective, who had watched the battle with detached interest, suddenly requested a mutual defense pact. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 Empire, whose border skirmishes with humanity had lasted decades, returned 3 captured colonies without demands. Even the mercenary guilds, who never took sides, quietly blacklisted contracts against human interests. But the true shift came from an unexpected quarter. A 𝗦𝗲𝘀 matriarch, one of the Dominion's ruling caste, appeared on interstellar feeds denouncing the war. "We were misled," she declared, her voice carrying across 100 worlds. "The humans were never our enemies. Our arrogance was." Vance watched the broadcast in a crowded mess hall. The colonists around him exchanged glances. No cheers. No jeers. Just silent acknowledgement of a truth they'd always known. The 𝗕𝗲𝘀 received new orders. Not to press the advantage. Not to punish. To stand down. To watch. When the first 𝗦𝗲𝘀 trade envoy arrived, bearing gifts of fusion cores and agricultural drones, Vance met them at the gate himself. The lead diplomat, her carapace polished to a ceremonial shine, bowed low. "We would appreciate guidance," she admitted. Vance gestured to the fields beyond, where children played among the crops. "Start by understanding what you tried to destroy." That night, as twin moons cast silver light over the colony, a young 𝗦𝗲𝘀 scribe, part of the diplomatic entourage, recorded her observations in a journal that would later become famous across the galaxy. **They don't gloat. They don't threaten. They simply continue. And in that continuation lies a lesson we should have learned long ago. True strength needs no demonstration. Asterisk. The retribution powered up its drives. Its work here was done. As it vanished into the black, the colony below thrived. Not as a fortress. Not as a warning. Just as a home. The harvest season brought unfamiliar ships to New Horizon skies. Not warships this time, but merchant vessels from a dozen species, their holds filled with goods instead of weapons. They came cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they realized no one would fire upon them. The colony's market swelled with alien metals, exotic fabrics, and strange fruits from worlds light years away. Vance walked through the bustling trade quarter, watching as a 𝗕𝗲 merchant demonstrated a plasma forge to human engineers. The alien's movements were stiff with residual fear, but his voice held something new: respect. "Your people adapt quickly," he observed as a human mechanic modified the design on the spot. "We've had to," Vance replied. Word had spread. New Horizon wasn't just a colony anymore, it had become a symbol. The place where the galaxy's most feared warriors learned humility. Tourists came to see the bullet-scarred walls preserved as memorials. Scholars arrived to study the battle tactics that had defied conventional wisdom. And veterans from a dozen species made pilgrimages to stand where the impossible had happened. The Retribution's captain returned unexpectedly, her ship descending without fanfare. She found Vance repairing a fence at the colony's edge. "They're talking about you on Earth," she said by way of greeting. "Proposing to make this system a protected historical site." Vance drove another post into the soil. "We're not a museum." "No," she agreed. "You're something better. A living lesson." In the capital cities of the 𝗕𝗲 Dominion, changes came slowly but irrevocably. The old warlords found their influence waning. New voices emerged, commanders who had survived New Horizon and returned with uncomfortable truths. Their stories couldn't be silenced, not when so many had witnessed the same thing. A human freighter captain, her ship damaged by a micrometeor shower, limped into a 𝗕𝗲 repair station expecting hostility. Instead, the dockmaster gave her priority service. When she asked why, the alien simply said, "We remember New Horizon." Back on the colony, the first mixed-class school opened its doors. 𝗕𝗲 younglings sat beside human children, all learning the same history from the same teachers. The galaxy watched closely, some in hope, others in fear. As night fell, Vance stood at the observation deck watching ships come and go, their running lights painting streaks across the dark. The colony's defenses still stood, but their guns remained silent. Their power now came not from fear, but from something far more dangerous to old orders. Example.